Facebook. Okay. Oops. Okay, we'll be live in just a second. Okay. Welcome everybody to Consciousness Conversations with Naren and Raj. Happy Friday if you're watching us live. Good to see you, Pops.
Good to see you, kid.
You might notice I am sitting in a car. I stopped on my way back from the Bay Area, just led a couple of offsites, and took a pause to be with you all today. If you haven't joined us before, I'm Raj Sundra, and this is Naren Philip Tokes. Naren is my father-in-law. I'm married to his wonderful wife, Gabrielle, his wonderful daughter, Gabrielle. And, over the years, Naren has been my coach and, in many ways, a father figure, as my father passed away when I was 12 and has really deepened my understanding of consciousness and awareness and the things that drive me, that lead to getting in the way of having the life that I really want and the impact that I want to make in the world. So welcome, Naren, aka Pops. What would you like to say hi this afternoon?
Hello, everyone who's there, and hello, everyone who's not there. Hello, Raj. This is kind of interesting. You're in the car. I'm drinking coffee. It reminded me of that, I can't remember his name, the comedian who does coffee in cars.
Jerry Is that Jerry Seinfeld doing
Yeah,
that?
it is. It is.
Consciousness and coffee. Consciousness. I got some right here.
Consciousness in cars with coffee.
That's great.
Other than that, it's a beautiful day up here in the great Northwest. I see clouds over the mountains, but sometimes when the weather is changing, you get layers of clouds as you look at the mountains. And I'm looking past the orchard in front of my house at a big stand of cedars, and then at the clouds, and then the mountains above it. Mixed clouds above that. Just beautiful. I live in such a beautiful place. I'm so blessed in so many ways. And it just blows me away that here we are doing this thing, and as many people who want to can be listening, being together. You're in a car. I'm here looking at the mountains. And it's just, the technology is just amazing. When I think it was about 1952 when we got our first television. I was 7 years old. And I remember my dad and Martin Logan, an old pal of his from the Navy. Martin was on the roof moving the antenna around, and my dad was we were watching the television, yelling at my dad so he could yell up to Martin to keep the thing moving. And there was just all this fuzz, all this fuzz. It was like a little screen about the size, smaller than the size of this computer. And I remember there was fuzz, 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 and all of a sudden it cleared. And it was a science fiction movie. I think the name of it, I go back to it, I think it was 1000 BC or 1 million BC or something. I think it starred Victor Mature, but I'm not sure. And it was these dinosaurs fighting. That was the first view. And I'm a 7-year-old. And I had never had any idea what a TV was or how this could happen. And I just about fainted, you know. It was so exciting to see this. And it was still sort of fuzzy and indistinct, but it was this incredible experience. And that was a common experience in 1952. There were a lot of kids seeing television for the first time. And if you just look at the difference between 1952 and today, it's what? About 70 years, a little less. And you look at the technology now, where we can do this. I can see you crystal clear. People anywhere in the world can be watching this if they choose to. The ability to communicate technologically is so profound. And yet our willingness to communicate, to actually listen, to actually be attuned to others is still often so limited. You know, like people who want to build walls, build these big walls that are absolutely unnecessary and hugely expensive. And now they're talking about cutting off fundamental welfare benefits and health and programs to pay for this fucking wall. We build walls. As people, we build walls, you know. And if we have enough power and we have some money, then we build actual walls. Rich people build walls around their house, around their property. We build these big fences. He wants to build a big fence to stop those poverty-stricken Mexicanos from trying to find a better life. And that's what our ego does. We just continually build bigger and bigger, stronger and stronger walls, and to hold on to those walls. And in doing so, we're totally unaware. We're totally unaware that the wall is actually making us a prisoner. We are prisoners of our own walls, because it has some limited success in people from getting in, energy from getting in, love from getting in. It keeps love from getting in and love from getting out, understanding coming in, understanding going out, connectedness. It really just completely prevents connectedness to the extent we build it. And when we build these big walls internally, we can't just build them like on the big borders. We basically have walls against. When we build walls, we prevent ourselves from. There's also walls so we can't be in touch with our own feelings. Those walls prevent us from being in touch with our own feelings. They're not only on the outside, because in the very process of building them, we're closing our hearts, we're closing our availability. And when we do that, we prevent love from coming in and love from going out, feeling from coming in, feeling from going out. The only way those walls work is to insulate us from feeling. That's repressing the feelings inside and walling ourselves off from feeling, being aware. So we're basically, as Osho described it, we're basically choosing not to be alive, because it's life that is love and feeling and allowing understanding and change to come in and out of us. And so when we wall ourselves off like that, we cut ourselves off from life. And then we're limited to the life that can come in through the mind, through the filter of the mind. And that life is very poor. No matter how much money you got, that life is very poor because there's no real love in it. There's no real affection in it. There's no real pain in it other than the misery of keeping the pain in place. So we're constantly in misery. Hold that in place. We're constantly in fear to hold that in place. It's unavoidable. If we're living like that, we're constantly in fear, repressed, which means we're holding the fear in place. It drives us unconsciously. And that's how we live our lives. That's how a Trump has to live. He cannot see the truth. He cannot experience love. He cannot experience compassion. It's just not available to him because he's repressing all of the awarenesses that would permit it to happen. Repressing his fear and his insecurity. And yet we have the technology in this situation where he can manifest that insecurity on a vast level. He can build a wall that keeps all of these people, spend all of this money. He can cut people off. And the people who support him like it because they're living on the same energy level. They're living in the same consciousness of fear to keep the fear away from them. And he offers the illusion of control to keep that fear away. Of course, it doesn't work. Ultimately, it all turns to shit when we do that stuff over time. But it perpetuates itself. You know, a Hitler lives, but a Hitler must die because he's creating tremendous opposition. A Trump must eventually die, and then he lives in fear, dies in fear, and the fear lives in the culture, lives in the vast communal consciousness. And until we commit ourselves to seek awareness, to be willing to be afraid, to be willing to be insecure, to be willing to open ourselves up to what life actually is, to open ourselves up to awareness, to feeling, to feel the pain, to be present. Until we start to open ourselves up to that, we will always have the Trumps. We will always have the oligarchs. We will always have the dictators. And we will always have some good people, but even those good people are not necessarily seeking awareness and consciousness. They just have their own belief system. But they do have some opening to their heart. Because if, for example, if you truly believe in Jesus, love one another. That can be a message that does get people to open their hearts some if they take it sincerely. And certainly some people are sincere in that. But if it's not accompanied by the search for awareness, the path to consciousness, it's very limited. It's very limited. And the dictators will always have their power. Anyway, I didn't know where I was going with that, but there you go.
Yeah, very timely, and I just really love what you're saying. Gabby and I've been watching this show, X Company, and it's all about the a young group of spies in World War II in Europe, and it just boggles my mind how many people can be so unconscious and carry out the atrocities that happened during that time. And it's just interesting that you're speaking to that. So thank you for your words on that.
X Company, where is that? What is it on?
It's on Hulu. Yeah, it's pretty good. You might want to check it out. So you said that you were talking about a topic with one of your coachees, or AKA students, and our relationship to awareness and how that changes over time. Did you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. How much time do we have in our first phase schedule?
I'd say 10 more minutes. And then just for those listening, if you have any questions or comments, put those in the comments window on the Facebook channel, and we'll do our best to get to your questions in about 10 minutes. And we'll be ending at approximately 1:40 today. Okay.
Unless there are no questions.
Unless there's no questions, yeah.
So, first I want to say, just to have some clarity, when I coach clients, that's one level of work. Those people are wanting to deepen their awareness, and also very much they're trying to deal with habits, patterns, behaviors that are not helpful to them. They want to relax more. They want to feel better, and they want to change patterns. That's one level. Those are just clients that I work with, and I have quite a few. That's where most people are at. But I've also developed a few students, and those are people who are going beyond, while they still may work with all of that stuff, and still do work with all that stuff, their intention, their aspiration is to develop on a level of consciousness that is much higher. That they really want to get beyond just working with the issues. They want to really expand their consciousness through this work and through meditation beyond just the practice, beyond just the practicalities of dealing with stuff. And it's sort of a different level of work, and I like working with both. But what was happening today with this, and this was one of my students. One of the things I love about working with people at this level is they ask questions on a higher, deeper level, and then I have to look and see what I know or don't know. And the thing is, when I'm talking, like even now when I was talking, I don't think about it, I don't plan it. I open up to emptiness. I open up to energy. I open up to space and just see what comes, and then share what comes through me. But the thing he was asking about and we were talking about was the relationship. Well, this isn't how he phrased it, but the focus was about the relationship between our window onto consciousness. When we close our eyes and tune into the breath, and then by doing that, we shift our attention to awareness from the ego mind, and we're aware of the breath and awareness. That's what we do, because when we're aware of the breath and not the mind, we're all in awareness. And so we have that awareness, and we're bringing our attention to the breath. But then there's also this vast awareness that is beyond. We have this little window on awareness, which is limited by our identification with the ego mind. Even when we're shifting our attention from the ego mind, there's still this very, very deep conditioning. There's levels and levels of darkness and conditioning on a conscious and deeply unconscious level. And that identification, that conditioning, keeps us, and is the only thing that keeps us from experiencing that vast awareness. And that's the dance. That's the dance that we are all doing. And it's what's the difference is between being enlightened and being unenlightened. That identification with the darkness, with the ego mind, both conscious and unconscious, is the only thing that prevents us from experiencing that vastness. And that made me remember a line that I never quite got before. In terms of how can you describe that relationship between our little window into awareness, which is limited by all of that identification and conditioning, and that vast awareness itself. Because awareness's fundamental nature is to be aware. Consciousness, space, emptiness, soul. We can describe it in many, many ways. God or godliness. That vast emptiness, which is space, and that we connect to when we tune into the breath. But through a little window. It starts with just a little window that we're looking through into that. So by looking through that little window limits what we see and understand. But outside that window, there is the vastness of consciousness and emptiness and awareness, all of that. Emptiness, silence, space. And the line I remembered, and what he was asking about was the relationship between those two things. They really aren't two things. They're just simply the same thing viewed from a different perspective. Actually, awareness itself is what Osho called pure subjectivity. It's just awareness. It's just awareness. Our window on awareness it's that awareness, but our access to it is limited by ourselves. And it reminded me of this line. I don't remember who the philosopher was. It might have been Goethe. It was one of the Germans, I think. And he said, when we peer into the abyss peers back at us. When we peer into the abyss peers back at us. And that, to me, beautifully describes, in a poetic way, that relationship. Not a relationship, it's not a status, but that relating of our subjectivity to the vast subjectivity. It's our subjectivity, which is, it's all the same thing, it's just awareness. But our awareness is limited by our perspective, with all of the identification with ego, mind, fear, all of that sort of stuff. That limits our awareness. Everything that limits our awareness means that we are limiting the window, the aperture through which we are looking at awareness. We're looking at the vast awareness, but through blinds and filters and all of this stuff from our conditioning. But when we do look through there, existence looks back at us. Existence is aware of us because awareness is aware of everything. And I just love that, to see that when we peer into the abyss peers back at us. And that abyss, they call it an abyss because it's scary. It is fucking scary. It's our fear of dissolution, our fear of death, our fear of disappearing prevents us from really being with that because the ego mind can't exist on that level. The body doesn't really exist on that level, although the body will continue to exist for one more lifetime when we're truly one with it. That's what happens to enlightened folks. So we are told by enlightened folks. I have no personal memory of that or experience. So, to me, it was a wonderful understanding that while we are afraid of the abyss, it's also our essence. We are limiting our relationship, our relating to it, our experience of it, only by our fear and ego, which includes, that's our personality is made up of fear. Our strategy to deal with fear. And just to understand that, to get that space is there. And it's always waiting for us, you know. It doesn't really wait, not really waiting for us, because there is no time. And waiting includes time, cause and effect. There is no waiting. But we can say from our perspective, our limited perspective, it's waiting because it's always there. It's always there when we look at it from whatever little aperture we have. And that is, to me, that is such a beautiful understanding, to know that, to really help us relax a little bit. It's always there. If we do the work, it's always there. It's not something we have to achieve. It's not something we have to qualify for. It's there always, and it's our fundamental nature. All we are doing is letting the filters, letting the fear fall away on our way up the mountain of consciousness.
Say that last part again.
On the way up the mountain of consciousness.
Uh-huh. Love all this. I had dinner. Gabby and I had dinner with Joan and Robin Bordeaux last night, and we were just talking about family and how the holidays bring up things, and one of the things that just struck me with what you said is if we letting those filters fall away, there's something there around that, like love is right there if you let that other stuff fall away. And I just noticed time and time again when I was up at the house in Sequim that there's just this battle going on inside me. I knew, like, if I could just, and I was asking Joan, like, hey, what's your coaching about getting off it? Because it's kind of like getting off it is identity association in some ways, I think. And I could see that, like, if I just did this, I would restore intimacy, I would restore connection, and take that wall down that I'm putting up. And sometimes it's just so difficult, it seems, to get oneself.
Well, what is it? What is it that stops you? It's only your identification with the ego. You're holding on to that shit. It's not holding on to you.
Right.
You're holding on to that stuff desperately, because the more stressed we get, we're holding on to that stuff desperately. It's our way of protecting ourselves. When you say getting off it, even from Landmark, which is not really spiritually transformational in a sense, it's more psychological work, but it has powerful impact. What does getting off it mean? Getting off it means letting go. Getting off it means giving up the position we're holding on to. Letting go, surrender, acceptance. It all comes back to acceptance. You use the word love. That's another way of characterizing that emptiness. It's not emotional love, but the essential nature, again, another essential quality of it is acceptance. It doesn't judge anything, because judgment doesn't exist in that space. The mind doesn't exist in that space. So it's only acceptance. It's just acceptance is a conceptual thing, but the quality that acceptance reflects is an essential quality of awareness. It's just there. And acceptance gets to understanding, gets to compassion, which is love. And it really is. The real acceptance at the highest level is the quality of this awareness, the quality of this consciousness. The quality, when we're totally open and we're feeling acceptance, I mean, Osho talked about it a lot. They're like, you end up in this sea of overwhelming bliss, because it's total yes, it's total acceptance. You're not fighting anything. And in that place, when you really let go of all the conditioning, all there is this vastness of emptiness, of beauty. And that is the highest level of love, which is compassion. Because why? Because there's no separation. There's no you and me. There's no yes and no. There is only acceptance. There is only yes. There's only space. There can't be conceptual acceptance because there's no resistance to let go of. but there's the quality of receptivity. There's the quality of acceptance. And in that space, there's nothing but compassion, because we're all one. We're all one. And everything is one. It reminds me of one of my earlier wives, the wonderful Paula, who one time we were fighting. And I said to her, I was really frustrated. And I said to her, all you care about is love. And that really stopped her for a second. And she looked at me and she said, love is all there is. Love is all there is. When we get beyond the fear, then that's what's left, is that space. Even beyond the emotions, such as is coming up in me, there is just the experience of oneness. That is love.
Love it. Yeah, when I was up there, I wrote this song called "Family," and I was sort of debriefing myself at the end of the trip, like, how can I do better? Because I know I can. And there's 4 words that I say in the song as part of the lyrics: compassion, curiosity, compassion, understanding, and forgiveness. So there's sort of a rap line that goes: curiosity, compassion, understanding, and forgiveness. And all I want, love and peace is all I really want. And it's amazing how much pain and suffering we put ourselves through, you know? And like, why do we do that? I mean,
well, we do it because of our identification with fear. Mm-hmm. Every harm, all of the harm we do comes out of our own fear. Mm-hmm. Comes out of and the other side of fear, which is desire. Desire is really an aspect of fear. We want something other than what is, so there's fear and desire.
Mm-hmm. I'm just capturing that.
And the fear the desire is to somehow protect us from the experience in which fear happens. For example, Trump wants people who want all this money, there's never enough money. They want all this money. Why do they want to have that money? Because so they don't have to feel insecure. So they don't have to feel insecure. They don't have to feel fear of not having enough by endlessly amassing more than they can never use. That's what people do. It's all living. It always comes back very simple. There's only 2 things. There is fear. The ego mind is fear. Not the cogitation mind, but the ego mind is fear. And its sister desire, or brother desire. All there is ego, fear, desire, and emptiness. That's all there is. Only light and darkness. That's all there is fucking light and darkness. But in our head, we make it all complicated and we don't see how simple it is. We don't want to. The ego does not want to. The ego survives based on this duality and complication which is driven.
Oh, I was thinking about my conversation with Joan last night, and she was talking about what you were saying about getting off it. You have something that you're willing to give up or get off of, some position or something of that nature. And I was just curious about more and more I want to get off it because I don't want to be experiencing all of the pain and upset and disconnection that occurs when I'm on it. But that also seems like you could interpret that as a desire to not be with how it is. So
No.
what is...
No,
okay, great.
No. I mean, let's put it, let me step back. The mind turns fucking everything into a concept which is duality and relates to fear and desire. So yes, there's a desire to be free of the pain that all of these negative behaviors generate. And if we stay on the level of ego, the most we can have is plans generated by the ego, the 10 Commandments or whatever in the fuck else we choose as ways to get out of that, or to be good. But the fact of it is, the only way out of unawareness is awareness. All of those things are functions of unconsciousness, functions of ego. All of that fear, desire, all that stuff, it's all the same. It's the functions from the ego mind, and it's in unconsciousness. Now, we have awareness. As we get an awareness of that, we can, from awareness, choose different ways. But we have to get clear about our path. One of the first steps in awareness is to understand is that the only fucking thing we need is awareness. That's all we need is more awareness, more consciousness. Which means, on the other side, is to reduce our identification with the mind and ego. That's all we need to get, really get, and then work toward that, move toward that. So it's the practices that support awareness, the practices that do not support a mind. Meditation, the stuff I teach, it has to come from the path of awareness. Now, it can also be love. Some people get drawn to transformation by love because they're that kind of person. So you can have devotion. You can have the yearning for compassion, the yearning for oneness, which can be the path of love. And there can also be the path of awareness. Osho said, but at the highest level, they're the same thing. Osho said there are many paths up the mountain, but only one mountain, the mountain of consciousness. So you can take the path of love, the path of compassion, the path of devotion, or the path of awareness. And at some point up the mountain, those paths join. Somewhere on the way up the mountain, those paths join. You cannot reach a certain level of awareness without having compassion. You just can't. It just happens. Compassion is an aspect of awareness. So if you're seeking compassion, but again, some people seek compassion because Jesus said, "Be loving." The problem with that is if you're really seeking it and you're willing to give up what's in the way of it, then you can get there. But what's in the way of it is unconsciousness. And if you're not clear that compassion arises out of awareness and awareness arises, if you're not seeking awareness, you're simply seeking compassion and you're seeking it in and from the mind, that's the slow boat. That's really the slow boat. You'll have some change because if you're really seeking love, really seeking compassion, those will come to you. And then as you go farther along that path, you will see that they are functions of awareness. So then you'll be after more compassion via awareness, or awareness through more compassion. They're all together because at the end of the road, they're the same fucking thing, just different paths. And at a certain point, they have to meet and continue together.
All right. This is, gosh, I'm taking different notes on the things that you say also, so people can just get a quick download if they're not going to watch the whole video on the replay. So if you're seeing me look around, that is what I'm doing. We're approaching the end of our time today, and I don't see any questions at this moment. So is there anything else that you'd like to say, Pops, before we jump off for today?
I guess I have mixed feelings about you taking notes and writing it down. Mm-hmm. I understand your intention, and it's good to share it with people. But, Osho mentioned that the understanding is something that happens in silence. Understanding is something that happens when we stop doing. So the process of writing down, concentrating enough to really get it, conceptualize it, write it down, is actually keeping you from being with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I encourage you to make space to also be with it. Just to be with be with your awareness, be with your yearning for compassion, be with what is left after the conversation.
I hear that. I hear you. All right. Well, I love you. Thank you for the amazing downloads today. And thanks, audience, for joining us live, or if you watch the replay of that as well. If you would like to learn more about what Naren has to offer, you can go to his website, NarenConsciousCoaching.com. And you can learn a little bit about the one-on-one coaching he does, the workshops that he's offering, and also the public speaking events that are upcoming. I strongly encourage you to check out any of those offerings. My life has completely altered through the coaching and the work that I've done with Naren. I'm so, so grateful. And I just wish as many people as possible have access to that. And if you want to learn a little bit more about what I do in terms of bringing this work into companies, you can go to gotransformance.com and check out our offerings and schedule a call with me if you'd like to learn how I support companies in scaling rapidly and easily through up-leveling consciousness and applying top business strategies into the workplace. Anything you'd like to add, Pops?
The only thing I would add to that is the work you are doing, as I understand it. Some of it is just great processes, like this 90-day game, which allows people to figure out what they want and then what's in the way of it, and then how to get there and how to monitor their performance. It's brilliant and really helps people change and recognizes that real change doesn't happen without continued application. But within that game, you and I have designed processes that support the transformation of consciousness, which are the sorts of things I teach, and it's the game we're talking about. So it brings awareness to looking at transforming and scaling your company and the people within it for the betterment of all. And it has it's something nobody else is doing, as far as I know. And it's very powerful and very, very useful. So anybody who's in a company that's looking to grow and scale, it's beautiful work. And Raj is brilliant at it. He's the best listener I've ever known. So check it out if you feel to.
I appreciate that. And we'd love to hear from you, either on Naren's side or my side. And have a wonderful rest of your Friday and a great weekend. And we look forward to joining up with you again next Friday. Anything else from you, Pops?
Nope.
All right, everybody. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye. Oh, we got to close with your statement that I think you said Osho also said.
Enough for today.
Enough for today. Namaste.
Namaste.